I don't think we're going to hear the end of this story. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and welcome back to another video. I have recorded so many videos today. This weekend is actually going to be pretty decent video-wise, I guess. There's a lot of stuff coming out. So I have just dropped, this may just be a double upload day, I'm not sure, but I have just dropped a 6-ish minute video quickly going over the original article that was released first thing this morning, and today is going to be slightly longer. We are having a deeper look into the Racing Point fiasco. So, as we all know, Racing Point have been deducted 15 points and fined heavily €400,000 as Renault's protest into the car legality was upheld. It puts them 6th in the Constructors' Championship now on 27 points. I was about to say 47, but 27 points and behind Renault. Most importantly, Renault in all of this jargon and just politics and legal nonsense have just moved in front of them in the Constructors' Championship. But looking into the article that was released on the F1 website, following the news that Renault's protest against Racing Point's brake ducts has been upheld, the FIA has moved to announce that it is clamping down on how much teams can copy or clone from a rival's F1 car design from 2021 onwards. They are taking action, and it is quite rightly so, as I think this was Otmar has said, we do not think this is what F1 should become. We don't want next year to have 8 or 10 Mercedes or copies of Mercedes on the grid, where the main skill becomes how do you do this process, this copying process. We do not want this to become the norm of Formula 1, which I fully respect. I don't want to see, as a fan, I don't want to see every single team copying almost exactly the details of the championship winning car. That is rubbish. I would hate that, and it would ruin the sport. But what we're going to do today is take a huge in-depth, this is going to be a lot of political jargon and everything. We are looking at the official FIA document that was released today and just sort of breaking it down and seeing the implications that this is going to have. As I have been browsing Twitter, and I've seen a lot of people, Twitter basically, up in arms, cursing, swearing, all this, that and the other. Why aren't they disqualified from the championship? They're driving an illegal car. Investigate Mercedes, yada, yada, yada. Oh boy, let's get into this long document that I've just read through. So it starts with the procedure of how this all started. I'm only going to highlight the important sections of this document. So on July 12th, 2020, after the Styrian Grand Prix counting towards the Formula 1 Championship, Renault claimed that since the brake ducts are particularized in the table of listed parts at the end of Appendix 6 of the 2020 Formula 1 sporting regulations, the RP20 uses listed parts not designed by Racing Point and is therefore in breach of said sporting regulations. Which is fair enough. That is the official protest from Renault. The protest of the brake ducts on the Racing Point car. So later on in the procedure section, paragraph 9, by document 56 of the British Grand Prix published on the 2nd of August 2020, in a meeting with the stewards and in order to facilitate the analysis process, Racing Point stipulated that the relevant parts named by the protest and used during the Styrian Grand Prix, Hungarian Grand Prix and British Grand Prix were the same. Therefore, all parties agreed that there was no need to again seal and impound the relevant parts of cars 11 and 18. So what I said in my video earlier today, if this comes out on the same day, where I said that they haven't been penalised so much in Hungary and Britain, they must have changed the brake ducts somewhat. They have not. The brake ducts from Styria that are illegal are the same that they've used in Hungary and Britain. So there wasn't much left in the procedure. We will move now to the Renault allegations, the allegations that Renault have put forward. So that was their original sort of protest, and now there is a lot that they have stated. As evidence of the above claims, Renault alleges that the front brake ducts of the RB20 cars are barely distinguishable from the front brake ducts of Mercedes W10 of last year. And then in contrast, also in paragraph 5, Renault considers the front brake ducts of other F1 teams are clearly distinguishable from those on the Mercedes W10, and any differences on the RP20 are seen as minor changes with respect to the original geometry of last year's Mercedes, which do not make the front brake ducts a new or proprietary design, which is understandable. They have copied literally 95% of it and changed small bits. That is not designing your own part. And then as for the rear brake ducts in paragraph 6 of the RP20 are evaluated by Renault as indistinguishable from the rear brake ducts on the Mercedes W10. They allege this is a apparent level of detail of the external and internal aerodynamic geometries replicated in the RP20 brake ducts, which would not have been possible to achieve from public sources such as photos, and there aren't even minor differences. Paragraph 7. It is apparent to Renault that Racing Point received information from Mercedes in 2019. Renault argues that the date of receipt of this information is irrelevant. The sporting regulations explicitly state a competitor shall only use listed parts which are designed by it. And then number 8, this leads Renault to the conclusion that the RP20 is in breach of the sporting regulations. So the key thing to take away from this at the moment is we are dealing with the sporting regulations, not the technical regulations. If there was a breach of the technical regulations, the car would be disqualified. Hands down. It is a breach of the sporting regulations instead, which is why there is a deduction of points and then also a fine. It is 2 different sets of regulations. So we move to Racing Point's defence. Let's see what they have to say for themselves. Paragraph number 9. As an adjunct to a contract with Mercedes to provide the brake ducts, Racing Point received from Mercedes a set of... that's a lot of Mercedes. Racing Point received from Mercedes a set of 2019 Mercedes W10 brake ducts. Those parts were never used in 2020. Additionally, they provided no new data or design information that had not already been received legitimately by Racing Point from Mercedes during 2019 in accordance with said sporting regulations, then in effect and because the brake ducts at that point were non-listed parts. This is Racing Point's main argument. At the time of purchase, the brake ducts were non-listed parts, so there is no breach in the slightest of the sporting regulations in what they did last year in purchasing the brake ducts. And basically this is all Racing Point really have in their defence. There isn't much else. So we move to the FIA technical department's analysis of the findings of exactly what they did once they impounded the brake ducts. And it is said in paragraph 10, the brake ducts were not classified as listed parts before the 2020 championship season. Their change in classification was first tabled at the F1 Strategy Group meeting in July 2018 and then agreed at a subsequent meeting on the 16th of January 2019. The final wording was prepared by the Technical Working Group on the 25th of March 2019 and approved the next day by the F1 Strategy Group and the F1 Commission. The World Motorsport Council approved the reclassification, and the teams, including Racing Point, participated in these meetings of the Technical Working Group and the F1 Commission on the 25th and 26th of March 2019. So this right here, this analysis by the FIA just proves that Racing Point knew. They knew that the brake ducts were becoming a listed part. So the fact that they bought them, knowing that they were going to become a listed part is bad. That is very bad on Racing Point's half. Yes, you can purchasing them, fine. That's absolutely fine. You can do that. You're allowed to do that. They're allowed to do that with gearboxes, etc., etc., etc. But knowing that they're becoming a listed part, you've got to change the design. And they knew that. They clearly knew that. They purchased them in 2019, and the first tabled classification change was in the middle of 2018. They knew it was coming. This is really bad for Racing Point. And so we move to the conclusion. The conclusion of the report. Obviously we know the impact that this has had, 15-point deduction and a €400,000 fine, but the overall conclusion in paragraph 3, Racing Point had the opportunity both during 2019, when all concerned were aware that the status of the brake ducts would change from non-listed parts to listed parts in 2020, and during the 2020 March FIA visit to the factory to explicitly clarify with the FIA their intentions with respect to the brake ducts going forward, and clarify this potentially grey area of the regulations now being argued. Racing Point chose not to do so, even though this clarification process by written document exchange is well known and routinely used by F1 competitors, which again clearly implicates Racing Point. They knew exactly what was going on. They knew the brake ducts were changing from a listed part, or from a non-listed part to a listed part. They purchased them beforehand, fine. But they knew, and they had chances to discuss it with the FIA, and they didn't. This is Racing Point's main issue. Because everyone was complaining at DAS like how that was legal. Mercedes did that with the FIA. They were constantly talking to them and telling them what they're doing and checking if it's legal, and the FIA said yes. That's why it's perfectly legal and they're able to use it. Racing Point have done this very, very badly. And in paragraph 10, however, since the Racing Point RP20 rear brake ducts were not run on last year's car, and since the stewards believe that the design effort expended by Racing Point in adapting the rear brake ducts originally designed by Mercedes pales in comparison to the significance of the original Mercedes work, the stewards conclude that the principal designer of Racing Point's RP20 rear brake ducts was Mercedes. And that is why they have been penalised. They have not used the rear brake ducts on the 2019 car since they purchased them, and they have just plopped them on to the car this year, and there is therefore no change, which means they have still been designed by Mercedes when they are a listed part. Thus, they have broken the sporting regulations. Whereas, as Renault have said in their allegations, the front brake ducts had minor changes, the rears didn't, and they were principally designed by Mercedes, not Racing Point. And that is the end of the FIA document, the long document. It took me a while to read the whole thing and just get around all the political jargon that you got to go through, cut out all the good bit or all the rubbish bits and just include the good bits. But of course, it's Formula One. It's not as simple as this, as Renault and rivals are considering an appeal against the severity of the Racing Point brake duct penalty. So they would like a harsher penalty on Racing Points. They agree with the decision. They agree that it is the correct decision, but they want a harsher penalty, a more severe penalty. What that is, they haven't said. Equally, the FIA are to amend the 2021 regulations to prevent car copying following this Racing Point case. And it's summed up beautifully by Zach Brown, that's who it was, regarding copying. Obviously, Racing Point claimed that they had copied the car via photography. It is clear from reading the document that I have just read to you that that's bullshit. and therefore you have to question anything else around that car. So I think this is potentially the tip of the iceberg, the starting point of looking at what's happened here, because I don't think it's healthy for the sport. It's thrown up a lot more questions than it has answered. It's something we too are going to review quickly and understand the appeal process and whether that is something that we want to potentially participate in. So this is by far not the end of the story. This story is going to keep evolving, keep updating. There will be new bits to keep coming forward. The FIA has said that it is unreasonable for Racing Point to be able to change their whole car. So I believe right now they are able to run the same car in 2021 due to all the complicated cost caps and token systems and freezing of parts. We won't see a completely different car in 2021. But it has shaken the sport. For the better, who knows? For the worse, who knows? But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.